Most of you aren't subscribed. Make sure to subscribe, as it helps out the channel. Without further ado, the series kicks off within the Police Department Division 1, where Supervisor Amamiya is furious at the fact that there has been a fifth victim with no new clues on the perpetrator. Turning to our MC Ashiki, Amamiya orders Ashiki to head home for the night, declaring that Ashiki being sleep-deprived will only slow down their investigations. Having a chat with Kiku, Ashiki fears that if he doesn't produce results soon, he'll get kicked out of the First Division. Kiku reflects on how Ashiki was fooled by a criminal and allowed them to escape 3 times, and on top of that Ashiki was once arrested for sneaking around at night. But Kiku praises Ashiki for pursuing justice, even though his methods aren't conventional. Ashiki says the recent murders have been stuck on his mind, something Kiku takes note of, as he uses the opportunity to allude to someone that can catch the current culprit at hand. Curious, Ashiki demands to know who this mysterious person is, but Kiku reveals that this genius detective is no ordinary man. Having been given the address along with a picture of the genius detective, Kiku suggests that Ashiki visit him, leading Ashiki to an old apartment building in search of this detective. Entering the building, Ashiki wonders why the detective isn't working for the police full-time. But as Ashiki stumbles upon the detective's apartment building, Ashiki is told to go away as he tries to ring the doorbell. Believing that he must have heard wrong, Ashiki tries again, but once again is told to go away. Ashiki believes that he's being mistaken for someone else, but the detective orders Ashiki to go beg the gods for help in saving his job, surprising Ashiki as to how the detective knew he visited the shrine. When Ashiki tries to introduce himself as a fellow member of the police department, Ashiki gets ignored, but upon mentioning how Kiku was the one who told Ashiki to seek the detective's advice, the detective reluctantly opens the door, revealing his disheveled look. Ashiki is in complete shock, wondering if this is the same Kamonohashi Ron as the slick-backed gentleman in the photos, frightened to see Kamo's dead eyes and unkempt hair. Having been insulted enough, Kamo retreats back into his apartment, prompting Ashiki to follow after, asking how Kamo knows Kiku but almost steps on Kamo's cat. Kamo reveals that he was friends with Kiku's son, grateful that Kiku took care of him when he was young. As for the cat, Kiku sent it to Kamo fearing that Kamo would be alone. Kamo suddenly collapses to the ground, but Ashiki realizes that the ground has been padded, the windows are completely shut, also learning that Kamo has no internet connection, completely cutting himself off from the outside world. Seeing Kamo's list of how depressing his life has become, Ashiki tries to ask Kamo something, but Kamo simply refuses, stating that he knows Kiku has sent Ashiki to be his partner, but sadly reveals that Ashiki isn't the first person Kiku has sent, as Kamo has rejected and humbled everyone Kiku has sent. When Ashiki hears that Kamo has retired from being a detective, Ashiki asks for Kamo's advice on a recent murder case, but out of nowhere Kamo begins screaming, annoying Ashiki, as Kamo says he doesn't want to hear about any murders. Seeing as there is nothing that can be done, Ashiki turns to leave, but gets curious as to how Kamo knew he visited a shrine recently to beg gods for help. Kamo states that he noticed some pine pollen on Ashiki's shoulder, something that can be found around a nearby shrine. Coupled that with a can of coffee in Ashiki's left pocket and some spare change in his right, Kamo deduced that Ashiki had visited the Wakana shrine bright and early. Amazed that Kamo was spot on, Kamo gets annoyed that Ashiki is still here. Kamo adds that he can tell his grandparents raised Ashiki due to Ashiki's attitude. Smirking, Kamo states that he knows Ashiki is here seeking Kamo's help to avoid being kicked from Division 1, but is curious as to why Kiku would send someone like Ashiki that is reliant on others, someone that Kamo is well known to hate. Ashiki believes that Kamo will be able to solve the most recent murder, but when Kamo refuses, Ashiki begins screaming out the details of the recent murders, annoyed to see Kamo has put in earplugs to block out Ashiki's words. Trying to persuade Kamo, Ashiki suddenly gets a call from Amamiya, but gets his phone knocked away by Kamo, ordering Ashiki to not talk about work in his presence. Sadly, Ashiki had answered the phone, hearing Amamiya report that a sixth body had been found in Kazuhana Park in Shibuya, ordering Ashiki to head there since he's the closest. Before Ashiki can leave, he spots Kamo writhing in pain, uttering that he can't hold himself back any longer. Ashiki learns that Kamo can't resist solving a case once he learns of the details, having been forced to retire from being a detective, something Ashiki believes is due to Kamo's weak body. Kamo orders Ashiki to leave, as Kamo plans to knock himself out with some sleeping pills, but Ashiki is very persistent on Kamo solving the case, reminding Kamo that human lives are at stake. Intrigued by Ashiki's genuine passion, Kamo agrees to visit the crime scene, but warns Ashiki to never allow himself to leave Ashiki's sight. As both men jog to the scene of the crime, Ashiki is amazed at Kamo's athleticism, shocked to hear Kamo trains 4 hours a day in his home gym. As Ashiki and Kamo are taken to the victim's body, they learn that the victim is a private investment broker, Okamasa. Apparently Okamasa didn't end up going to a scheduled party last night, but as a police officer recounts some more details, Kamo suddenly lays down next to the victim's corpse. Kamo begins uttering that the victim had drowned, scolding the corpse for handing over their valuable goods without a fight, but this makes the police officer wonder how Kamo knows all of this without hearing about the other corpses. Kamo states that the white froth from the victim's mouth indicates possibility of drowning, and since his suit is still intact, Kamo deduces that his watch along with his wallet must have been stolen as well. Hearing all of this, Ashiki states that the other victims had similar deaths, all having their bodies intact, with no signs of poisoning. Only their valuable goods were stolen and their bodies seemed to have drowned. Kamo asks for more details on the victims, only to be handed a tablet of all the victims and where they were heading before their deaths. Seeing no overlap between victims, Ashiki wonders if there was a location to drown the victims, giving Kamo an idea of who the perpetrator is and where they can be. Leaping onto his legs, Kamo declares they'll be heading out, but first asks Ashiki for some spare cash. With Kamo disguising Ashiki in a fancy-looking outfit, they have to change Ashiki's hair at a nearby hair salon, but Ashiki notes how he's sleep-deprived, so he'll probably fall asleep. As Ashiki heads inside to meet with the barber, Kamo lays outside, weirding out some kids. With Ashiki and the barber having some small chit-chat, the barber asks for Ashiki to place his hair into the basin to be shampooed. As the barber heads off to retrieve some towels, the barber prepares to take out another item, but suddenly realizes that Ashiki has fallen asleep, smirking as he turns on the sink to drown Ashiki. Out of nowhere, Kamo appears, revealed to have picked the door's lock, declaring that the killer is the barber, but at the same time Ashiki lifts his head, having followed Kamo's instruction to hold his breath. Kamo reveals that the victims exhibited no signs of passing due to drugs or violence since the barber has specially crafted a basin that poured out oxygen-deficient air, something when coupled with water would immediately cause the victims to faint only to then drown. Kamo reveals that all the victims had messy hair, therefore the murderer only targeted people that were looking for a haircut, and by narrowing down the shops to ones that accept walk-ins and a place not known to many. Kamo states that the barber targeted only the rich, hence why Ashiki had to change his outfit, but when Kamo reveals they are detectives, the barber knocks down some shelves, fleeing. As the two chase after Barber, Kamo reveals that he had locked down the barber's escape route, demanding to know the barber's motive behind killing 6 people. When the barber declares that he hates the rich and doesn't regret his actions, Kamo suddenly orders the barber to jump to his death, weird as Kamo's eyes are suddenly glowing. With the barber now sharing those glowing eyes, the barber mindlessly follows Kamo's orders, all whilst Ashiki rushes to stop the barber. As Kamo snaps out of it, he scolds himself for letting his curse take effect once more, but surprisingly, Ashiki had managed to catch the barber before he jumped, buying Kamo enough time to save them both with a makeshift bungee rope. As the other detectives arrive, Kamo fills Ashiki in on his curse that causes him to slay the murder culprit, revealing that Kamo has a 100% success rate on solving cases, but his capture rate is 0. Realizing why Kiku sent Ashiki, Kamo declares that Ashiki's ability to protect others will overcome Kamo's fatal flaw, declaring that they'll work together moving forward. Flashing back, we see several people gathered around a young Kamo, completely amazed that Kamo was able to solve a cold case. Given the title of the smartest student in his school, Kamo's peers and teachers have high hopes for Kamo's future, a future where Kamo plans to become a detective. With a new day arriving, Ashiki visits Kamo's apartment, frightened when Kamo suddenly opens the door, excited to see Ashiki. Ashiki apologizes as he hasn't been assigned a case, disappointing as Kamo returns into his apartment, laying on the ground. Ashiki notices Kamo mumbling, annoyed that Kamo is blaming him for wasting his talent. But Ashiki gets curious upon learning Kamo used to attend Blue Academy, the world's most elite detective training academy. The academy also produced all the best detectives known to date, but although Kamo ranked higher than them all, during a practical exam, Kamo had wounded up slaughtering all the attendees, leading to Kamo being expelled and forbidden from obtaining his detective license. Ashiki wonders what's so important about a detective license, but Kamo reveals that the license gives detectives access to the world's toughest mysteries, but sadly Kamo will be executed by Blue if he even tries looking into any cases. Suddenly realizing that Kamo technically looked in the barber case with him, Ashiki fears what is going to happen to Kamo, but Kamo states that he'll have to lay low from here on out. Kamo reassures Ashiki that they'll still solve cases together, but Ashiki will have to do the digging whilst Kamo guides him. Ashiki refuses to be Kamo's puppet, but Kamo ignores Ashiki's cries, stating that he'll disguise himself when showing up to crime scenes, as Kamo needs to see and pay respect to the victims. When Ashiki tries to back out, Kamo simply scolds Ashiki for not bringing any cases to him, but Ashiki reveals that his boss, Amamiya, decides what he works on. When Kamo is curious as to who Amamiya is, Ashiki shows Kamo a picture of her, prompting Kamo to compliment Amamiya's looks, but also deduces that someone must have taken the photo for Ashiki. Ashiki admits that it was a coworker that fancied Amamiya, but as for himself, he personally is quite scared of her, something Kamo has noticed as well. Apparently this morning, Division 1 had received a report of a male corpse in his 20s with a head injury, but upon seeing a picture of the body, Amamiya went to check the scene of the crime, leaving Ashiki with his tasks to complete. Kamo praises Ashiki for receiving a task only he can solve, but Ashiki reveals that he's only ever assigned easy and boring tasks, with the most recent one being a report of missing money from a piggy bank. Ashiki apologizes for such a boring task, but Kamo states that he'll make everyone respect Ashiki, springing to his feet, donning a disguise, only to declare that no case shall go unsolved. As the two leave, Ashiki almost steps on the cat again, only to visit and introduce themselves to the girl that had reported the crime. Upon entering the women's house, Kamo strangely begins tinkering with a suitcase, believing it to be the piggy bank, but learns the girl's sister is home and it's her suitcase. Led to the actual piggy bank, Kamo is amazed that the girl has a rubber piggy bank. Ashiki begins asking questions, learning that the girl and her sister were out the other day, only to return and notice money missing from her piggy bank. Exploring the room, Kamo gets his mustache stuck in some of the sister's jewelry, but when Ashiki scolds Kamo for not taking the case seriously, Kamo asks Ashiki why he thinks none of the jewelry had been stolen when the piggy bank was robbed. Ashiki admits that he has no idea, but the girl does add that she's been getting some silent phone calls lately and has been locking up early. Smirking, Kamo states that everything makes sense, collapsing to the ground only to declare that he gives up. As Ashiki scolds Kamo for giving up so easily, the sister comes home. Sitting down with the two girls, Ashiki learns that the sister was visiting her parents when the crime took place, but the girl butts in promising that she isn't lying about her piggy bank being lighter when they returned home. When the sister says the girl is simply imagining things, Kamo speaks up, suggesting that they all give up. As the girl declares that she remembered her piggy bank being tough like an iron statue, Kamo declares that he has all the pieces he needs to solve the issues, asking to break open the piggy bank. As they open up the piggy bank, the girl attempts to count the coins, but Kamo stops her, declaring that they will have forensics look for fingerprints. In the meantime, Kamo heads out for some fresh air. Cutting to later that afternoon, Kamo is seen on a hill near a creek where Ashiki has met up with Kamo, reporting that none of the coins had the girl's fingerprint. As Kamo turns around, he reveals that they are at the same crime scene as Amamiya's this morning, both heading down to have a closer look. As Ashiki introduces Kamo as a friend, Kamo asks if Amamiya would be impressed if Ashiki solved the case, but entertaining Kamo's offer, Amamiya threatens to fire Ashiki if he doesn't solve the case. As Kamo lays down next to the corpse, he declares that everything is ready, tossing Ashiki a bag. Taking the stage, Ashiki starts by explaining the case of the missing money from the piggy bank, but Amamiya cuts Ashiki off, asking him to skip over such a trivial task. With Kamo standing up for Ashiki, Ashiki explains that the coins in the piggy bank only had the sister's fingerprint, taking out an exact replica of the girl's piggy bank and explaining that the coins weren't stolen and instead were replaced. Ashiki concludes that the sister is the culprit, but with a shaken look, the sister asks why she would ever have to lie about breaking the girl's piggy bank. Calming his nerves, Ashiki states that it has to do with the corpse of the man, something the girl does not deny. Ashiki deduces that the girl had returned home one day, only to stumble onto a stalker waiting for her, but having been chased into her living room by said stalker, the girl reached for the piggy bank, shattering and killing the man in self-defense. Since the coins were all covered in blood, the sister failed to fill a new piggy bank with the same amount of coins, and ended up moving the body to the nearby creek with her suitcase. With Ashiki finishing up his deduction, the girl asks her sister for the truth, but the sister admits that Ashiki was correct. When Ashiki tries to defend the sister for attacking the man in self-defense, Amamiya mentions that covering up a murder is a crime in itself, but out of nowhere, Kamo's eyes glow, prompting Kamo to order the sister to drown in the creek. With Ashiki holding Kamo back and everyone weirded out, the sister suddenly begins running towards the river, but when Amamiya attempts to grab a hold of the sister manages to break free. Luckily, Ashiki had chased the sister all the way into the water, allowing for Kamo to see the sister alive and well, just as he returned to his senses. Back at the station, Amamiya reports that Ashiki was right about the murder, but Amamiya is more curious about Kamo, having taken a liking to him. As Ashiki heads over to tell Kamo the good news, Kamo comes stumbling out of his apartment again, making Ashiki want to solve more difficult cases with Kamo, curious as to what Kamo is truly capable of. Cutting elsewhere, we enter the Blue Academy, where Principal Eam Emmerich is asked during a meeting if she remembers Kamonohashi Ron of the 87th class. With Eam and the anatomy instructor acknowledging that they do, the vice principal reveals that there have been reports of Kamo restarting his detective adventures. With various instructors arguing for and against Kamo being a detective once more, the principal orders for the tracking instructor to look into Kamo. Following Ashiki, we see him receive a call, suddenly rushing to a supermarket to meet up with Kamo, annoyed that Kamo is calling him to help shop for groceries. Kamo notes how normally people bring him food since he doesn't have money, but today is important since his cat ran out of food, forcing Ashiki to pay for Kamo's groceries. The employee reveals that the store is having a raffle today, handing Kamo a raffle ticket, which leads the two boys to the raffle station, where they read over the prizes. As Kamo steps up to spin the wheel, Kamo puts his all into the spin, shocked to see a golden ball appear, prompting the employee to announce that Kamo has won a hot spring vacation for 2 people. Kamo says he'll simply go twice instead of taking Ashiki, but the employee reminds Kamo that the trip is a one-time thing, threatening to cancel the trip if Kamo doesn't take someone else. As Kamo reluctantly fills out a form for himself and Ashiki, the employee mentions how the first place and second place prizes had already been won, but as Kamo and Ashiki leave, we see the tracking instructor hear about Kamo's hot spring trip. On the day of the trip, Kamo and Ashiki head to Benizome by taxi, learning that it was raining up until yesterday, only to be handed a pamphlet for the inn they'll be staying at. The taxi driver states that the location is called Benizome as the autumn leaves around the hot springs give off a Benny crimson color, but Kamo notices that they've been given the wrong pamphlet, as they are staying at the annex, not the main building. Acting weird, the taxi driver apologizes, handing Ashiki a single black and white piece of paper, swiftly dropping the boys off, only to speed off. Upon seeing the beat-up state of the Benizome annex, the boys wonder if the annex is even open, but out of nowhere some employees appear, along with the tracking instructor disguised as the innkeeper. The instructor thanks Ashiki for his police work, surprising Ashiki as he wonders how the instructor knows, but the instructor reveals that Ashiki's leather shoes are worn down, a common trait of police officers. With Ashiki amazed, Kamo steps up, correcting the instructor as reporters are just as likely to have worn down leather shoes, deducing that the instructor must have used the forms they filled, something the instructor doesn't deny. As the instructor leads the boys inside, he hands the boys a key to the hot spring, giving the boys until 8 a.m. the next day to use the hot spring, adding that dinner will be at 7 p.m. that night. Hearing that there are times for everything, the boys learn that there are 3 other parties staying at the same inn, but as the boys leave to check out the hot springs, the instructor gets excited, finally able to test out Kamo's capabilities. With Kamo and Ashiki enjoying the outdoors hot spring, Ashiki notes how the hot spring makes up for the rundown building. But Kamo adds that there is a legend the taxi driver didn't tell them about this inn. Kamo states that since the rivers nearby are so fast-flowing, it was common to have the hot spring overflow, so the innkeepers sacrifice a woman to stop the floods, but this ultimately led the hot springs to take on a crimson color. As Ashiki gets freaked out, he suddenly notices that Kamo's scar is bigger than he expected, learning that Kamo once received wounds all over his body, but only the scar on his neck remained. Ashiki notices a number in the scar, which Kamo confirms to be the number 6, representing his birth, but Kamo takes the chance to tease Ashiki for being a grandma's boy. Heading to the Beni room for some dinner, Kamo and Ashiki sit amongst the other guests, with Kamo being served an omurice covered in black sugar syrup. Kamo reveals that black sugar syrup helps him think, but Ashiki knows Kamo just likes sweets. Turning around, Kamo watches as a man and women are served some amazing array of dishes, along with a lone woman eating alone, but Kamo notes how there is one group of members missing, as the instructor said there will be 4 in total. Kamo smirks excitedly as for what is to come, taking out the Game of Life board game, only to ask Ashiki to play with him, but Ashiki apologizes to the other guest since Kamo is being too loud. Ashiki tells Kamo that it's conventional to play ping pong at the hot springs, something Kamo isn't against, finishing up their dinner, only to head to ping pong tables. Ashiki voices how dirty the room in general is, but Kamo notices an ancient scroll retelling the story of the Crimson Hue, making Kamo and Ashiki wonder if the legend is true. As the two prepare for their first match of ping pong, Kamo begins his serve, all whilst declaring that the loser must become the winner's slave for life. Completely caught off guard, Ashiki accidentally deflects the ball out a broken window, spotting it on a rock in the nearby river. Since there are no more balls, they both reason they should retrieve the lost ball, but with several minutes passing, the boys are quivering, having lost the ball in the river. As the boys hop into the hot spring to warm up, a sudden silhouette approaches, revealed to be Amamiya, who is also here to enjoy the hot spring. With Amamiya's cries echoing through the night, everyone has gathered in the dining area at around 10 p.m., all noticing Amamiya, who is completely embarrassed, having found out that she stumbled into the men's bathing area, afraid that Kamo now thinks she's a pervert. Just then, the woman from the other table cries that she wants a divorce, shocking her husband, but luckily Amamiya butts in, begging them not to divorce. With Ashiki realizing that Amamiya is drunk, Amamiya drunkenly heads elsewhere, but due to the commotion, the woman realizes she overreacted, telling her husband that she needs to cool down in the hot spring. Seeing that the husband is now alone, Kamo asks if he wants to play his Game of Life board game, managing to also convince the blonde women to join in as well. Cutting several hours later at 2 a.m., Kamo is dead last, all whilst the husband and the blonde dream of reliving their lives. Since it's already late, they pack up the board game, heading to sleep, all whilst the instructor watches from nearby. The next morning, a blood-curdling cry can be heard, following Amamiya, who runs into an employee who discovered a body. As everyone heads to the hot spring, they spot the wife's corpse floating in the hot spring, forcing Ashiki to hold back the husband as he cries out his wife's name, Sachiko. Amamiya notices that the body is entering rigor mortis, meaning that the death must have occurred sometime between midnight and 2 a.m. Getting close, Kamo promises to avenge Sachiko, something Amamiya finds very attractive. Kamo notes how there are too many leaves on the corpse's body, but the blonde woman cries that it is a curse, something that makes Kamo smirk. Signaling for Ashiki to take over, Ashiki begins asking the employee if they heard anything weird last night, but the employee reveals that since the inn is small, only one person takes turns watching over the employees, revealing that the instructor last night watched over everyone. The instructor brings up that he saw everyone playing the board game last night, all but Sachiko and Amamiya, declaring that Amamiya must be the culprit. As Amamiya hangs her head in shame, Kamo declares that Amamiya is innocent and that the culprit is someone else, stating that he'll prove that to everyone. Check out one of our other videos on the screen or in the info card above. Subscribe, like and comment.